I would now like to ask Sarada to come to us here, and she will basically give us a very short oversight also on what happened yesterday. You can either use the microphone or stay here, whatever you feel. Yeah.
This is on. Okay. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and it is a pleasure to be here, and good morning to all of you. So I'll wait for my slides to come on. Okay, so we've heard a little bit about the importance of conserving crop genetic diversity, coffee genetic diversity, and Aaron had mentioned earlier that 60% of those wild species are threatened with some sort of threats to them to extinction. So I'm going to concentrate on advancing the coffee genetic resource conservation and exchange. So a little bit about my organization. I'm from the Global Crop Diversity Trust from Bonn. I came from Bonn over to Mannheim yesterday, 2 days ago. And our mission is to conserve crop diversity forever, in perpetuity. And so we are an international nonprofit organization, and we work with international gene banks to ensure that crop diversity is protected for future uses for the good of everybody. So in 2016 and 17, the Global Crop Diversity Trust, in collaboration with World Coffee Research, developed the Global Coffee Conservation Strategy. At that time, Christoph was with World Coffee Research, and I worked with Christoph on developing the strategy, which was published in 2017. So to develop the strategy, we did a huge background study, looked at many literature. We did a survey. There are about, under the FAO views, there were 31 gene banks that were identified, and we sent a survey to really understand what is the status of the collections. So we had got 16 responses, 50%, which is not so bad. And then we did site visits. We visited 7 gene banks, 1 in situ site in Ethiopia, and we also did a private collection, Price Peterson's collection in Panama. And then we also, to really understand what does it cost to conserve these crop genetic resources ex situ. So in situ is where you conserve it in the forest. But as we know, with climate change and deforestation, many of these forests are being lost. So in the end, ex situ might be the only option for us to bring these collections ex situ. So we did a costing study using the Cartier Gene Bank in Costa Rica as a basis, and we've figured that to maintain that gene bank annually, it costs $250,000. And we had identified 4 main global collections. One is Madagascar, because you saw from previous presentations the unique diversity that they host. And then Ethiopia being the center of diversity of arabica coffee. And then in West Africa also has quite a bit of diversity, and the CNRA Gene Bank in Côte d'Ivoire is about 28 or so species in its collections. And then the Cartier, those are the 4 gene banks that are of global significance. And so we came up with, so what did we find from this, study that we did? Is that most of the coffee collections are not securely conserved or widely used. So not only are they threatened in the wild, but they are also ex situ collections due to lack of resources. They are not very well conserved. So they're all mostly nationally focused for national breeding programs. And we lack information systems. So we do not know what each of the gene bank, what are the contents of the gene bank collections. So without knowing, you just cannot exchange material between gene banks. And then there is very limited access to and exchange of this material. And that was the main conversation about, that we had yesterday in the special workshop that we had. And then there is funding issues, and then no duplication. So if one gene bank is affected by a typhoon or hurricane, and the collection gets lost, then it's lost forever. So we need some form of safety duplication and making sure that they are backed up. And also there is no standard quality management system on managing these gene banks. So these were the key findings from the thing. And so based on this, we came up with 6 key recommendations. Is we need to secure funding for these gene banks. So at $250,000 annual maintenance cost for 1 gene bank, with 4 gene banks, it's $1 million annual cost. And for that, the crop trust, the way we operate is through an endowment fund. To provide in perpetuity funding, we have an endowment fund where we put the money in, and then the distribution, the income generated from that is distributed to gene banks. So for $1 million annual, we need $25 million in our endowment fund to protect these important collections. And then using that funding, we would be able to then upgrade facilities and the capacity of gene bank staff and all of the equipment that is needed. And then, so we also need to look at the access and benefit sharing for germplasm exchange, specifically for coffee, and develop a framework for this. And then the information sharing, ensuring that they are all in one database, that everybody can access information and what each gene bank holds. And then safety duplication, as well as complementary in situ conservation as much as we can. And then I highlighted the access and benefit sharing because that is what I'll discuss more as we go along. And then, so in 2019, from USDA Foreign Agriculture Service, we got some funding to hold a workshop to look at the next steps to advance the global conservation strategy. And then we were supposed to have the workshop in 2020 in Côte d'Ivoire, but unfortunately, we all know what happened in 2020. We got COVID. So we could not hold that workshop in person. So in 2021, we did a virtual workshop where we had 4 days of, each day we discussed different topics, and we had 54 participants from 16 countries in that workshop. And this was the first step in advancing the conservation strategy. And so what came out of the workshop? So we identified, there were many different priority actions that came out of that workshop. And financing, safety duplication, protection of in situ and ex situ sites, conservation research in coffee and the wild relatives, and partnership building. And then the one I'm going to focus on is going to be policy. So what are the policy issues that were identified by the participants? And a lot of them were genetic resource holders in producing countries. And so one of them was national policies related to germplasm exchange and information sharing do not support the global system for conservation and use. And then national gene banks are bound by local laws. Hence, they are unable to share these endemic species or local varieties outside of their institute or country. Among gene banks, there are collections with old recognized varieties, along with products of research and breeding programs. And old varieties can be freely shared, like we see Coutura, Hybrid Timor, you can get them everywhere. Whereas some of these new products that are bred by an institution becomes the intellectual property, so those are not widely shared. Oops, sorry, back. And then, so a strategy required for each type of accession. So an accession in a gene bank, what you call an accession, is a sample from a particular population. So it represents it's a genetic diversity. So you have, for arabica, you may have 1,000 accessions. So each of them was collected from one specific location so that it can capture the entire genetic diversity of that species. And then more that came out was to build greater knowledge and understanding across the value chain of the benefits of exchange and the need to facilitate transparent and clear access and benefit sharing framework agreements for the long-term conservation and use of coffee genetic resources. And then support the use of a global system to monetize the benefits for the sharing of germplasm and information with bylaws declaring what can and cannot be done with shared information. So as Christoph earlier mentioned, we had that there is ambiguity of which one is Nagoya or the different legislation. So we really need clarification on which legislation each of these accessions fall under. And then support national legislation to encourage coffee conservation, intellectual property, right to use, and allow transfer of coffee material for testing in another country. And this is where the Cartagena Protocol, the phytosanitary issues also come in. And then we need to involve decision makers, which are coffee researchers, the coffee industry, policy makers in the countries, governments, to foster capacity building and to secure funding. And then implement policies to allow sharing of accession level data. So even if we have a database, I think data can also become intellectual property, so we need to ensure that, find a mechanism to share this information. And create an information system to request accessions and share information. And foster multi-stakeholder sensitization of laws covering exchange of genetic resources. And then plan a central repository to share all the laws, policies, agreements, phytosanitary regulations related to exchange of coffee genetic resources. I know these are all policy, it's boring a little bit, but these were all issues that were raised by these genetic resource holders. And then finally, support global engagement that focuses on conservation and use to benefit individuals and institutions. So yesterday, a few of us, thanks to the Coffee Consulate and Stefan for spearheading, as well as Christoph from RD2 Vision for spearheading, and also Dirk, this workshop that we had yesterday. And the goal of this workshop was to foster coffee genetic resource conservation, to a common scientific understanding of international legal status of coffee genetic resources, increase involvement of governments under relevant umbrellas. So we have those different international coffee organizations, we have the Inter-African Coffee Organization, the African Union, so we want to make sure that we are involving all these relevant international institutions, and then develop a pathway for a comprehensive ABS, access and benefits sharing regime. So yesterday the participants included, we had different presenters from the International Coffee Organization. Venusia was part of that, and that is probably what confused her about the location. And Inter-African Coffee Organization, African Union, CNRA, which is the Côte d'Ivoire, the genebank in Côte d'Ivoire, they participated online. We had from CIRAD and IRD represented, and of course myself, Crop Trust, and Aaron from Q, and we had other international experts on germplasm policies and regulations. And the outcomes of the workshop was that it was resonant with all the participants that the importance of conserving coffee genetic resources is not a question anymore. We have climate change it's already here. And so we can't keep telling that it's coming, it's here already. And farmers are feeling the impacts of it. So to ensure that we have a sustainable coffee industry, we need to ensure that these genetic resources are protected. And we need to link the conservation to effective access and future needs of the industry. And for this, the key is raising funds. So we need to, to raise funds, we need to link conservation to use for future needs. And then governments need to play a key role in regulating access and benefit sharing. And then one thing that we also found out that was there is no homogenized national legislation, making it difficult for users to navigate the system. And then we also discussed the expansion of the multilateral system. So there is under the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, under the FAO, there is the international treaty. So under the Convention of Biological Diversity, we have the Nagoya Protocol, and then for all food plants, there is the treaty. And so the treaty is looking at expanding its multilateral system. And that could be a good mechanism for adding coffee into this and could be a good solution to this access and benefit sharing issues. So this needs wider discussion with a much greater involvement of all the different stakeholders. And then the ICO and other regional bodies must be engaged in discussions. So this was a comprehensive list of actions, and the Crop Trust is looking at hosting possibly a workshop, funding dependent, so we are in the process of getting funds for holding such a workshop, where we can bring all the most of the countries that hold these genetic resources to have the conversation. And it is a step-by-step process. It is not going to happen overnight. We need to have these constant discussion, not just with genetic resource, the government agencies, industry, researchers. There are many stakeholders that we need to engage in this discussion. So with that, I will stop here and